lesson about how to approach drums for synthwave or synth pop. I think I've got a couple of things that would really help you guys out. So let's get straight to it. How do you actually get the sound of synthwave and synth pop drums? Well, it's actually quite simple. They all come from drum machines from the 80s. It's actually not that hard to get the sounds. Because it's 2021, I want to talk about how practically I would get to it as quickly as possible. Now, let's just listen exclusively to the kick drum that I have prepared here. Magic. Now, this kick drum came from Splice. I really recommend for this genre in particular, you get hold of a subscription to something like Splice. If you guys haven't seen this before, I think it's like a tenner a month or $10 wherever you are in the world. It's not that expensive, and you get a credit system for getting hold of samples. And what's cool about software like this, I'm not affiliated with them or anything, I'm just giving you my opinion. You can hone in on genres, and you can hone in on the exact stuff that you want. So for example, if I go snare drum, I immediately get everything. I've just selected synthwave on the genre box here. I don't know if you can see it, it's quite small. I've gone genre synthwave, and here I've got all the snares. I've already purchased quite a few for this genre, and they're all basically taken from two drum machines. The Lin drum machine series, which was kind of the thing, it was the thing that Prince used massively on his big records at the time. So you'll hear it if you go back and listen to his back catalogue. It's like everywhere and over everyone else's records as well. The Lin drum machines, and also the emulation drum machines as well, which was a keyboard, and it had like a little I always forget the name of it, but it had like a drum machine. Either in the keyboard, it would have it on a separate unit. And there are numerous other companies that made the drum samples, but they get the vibe, get some samples from something like Splice that are pre-made, and some of them are pre-processed, so you can get the sound very quickly. If you don't have a subscription to something like this, because that's where, like for example, we can get a kick. If I just get another kick up here, and we get Splice wherever it's gone, and we go, let's go kick. So let's go for another kick that's not on there. I don't know if you guys probably can't hear the output of this. So I'm just going to go here. You will now when I drag it into the door. Okay, so I've got these two kicks here. So just these two top tracks here. Let's listen to this one. Okay, that's one, and the other. So they both already sound right in the ballpark for the genre. But if you don't have access to something like Splice, you can get a sampler. This is cool. ADSR, really good company online. They have a free sampler little librarian, which is great. I got hold of some years ago, of some vintage drum samples that someone had made actually, and I processed them and I put them through into these folders. So I've actually got individual Lin drum samples. Now in 2021 you can get hold of literally anything if you just search for like Lin drum samples, or you could get a VST, which I'll show you guys in a second. But you can get a sampler like this where it's just organized the sounds I have. So I've got this little Lin drum here. Let's drag that out. Is it happy about that? Yes it is. So let's just make another track for this kick drum down here. But this is actually just dry from the Lin drum itself. Let's just make a bit of a pattern so we can hear it. Here. Ooh. Right there. Right. So that's like a dry sound. Now, the one from Splice sounds like this, which has already been processed. So that's one of the reasons as a composer, I'm less into sound design. So for me, you know, for some people they're obsessed with like, you know, making their own samples, which is amazing because I'm not the best at it. So I just rely on actually having, you know, samples made up for me. All Stratford palette, what's happening in menu? There you go. So basically what you're looking at it is that I've got the raw sample from the drum machine, which is one approach, and we can process from here. So we can change the pitch, add some reverb, you know, do some EQ, or get a much more processed sound from a sample library like Splice. So I prefer this method, and then what we can do is we can change that as we want. The other way that you can do it as well is you can do it like this. I've just got the emulation here. Now this is, it's an SP14 kind of thing. I can't remember what the actual module is, but this is another way that you can get at the drum sounds, where all these drum sounds are from that era. So if I hit run and I actually turn it on, I'm instantly 1984. So you can see that there's a lot of ways you can get at these sounds, but the most important thing is you've got to make sure you're in the right era, which sounds obvious, but it's you've got to either invest in a bit of software like this or get a subscription service to get at the samples, because no matter how hard you work at it, a Lindrum just kind of sounds like a Lindrum, and I do think that's a kind of like 75% of the work when you're looking at the drums of synthwave or synth pop. That's more synth poppy, because that's kind of less. I always think synthwave is like the EDM version of that stuff. So what I've done with this drum beat here, I'm just going to mute those two new kicks here. Let's just like have a listen here to the drums. So with a basic beat, all these samples are from, I believe, like a Lindrum type sound. And what I've done with the snare drum here, if you guys have a look at the other screen, is I've actually brought it down by a tone. Let's have a muck around. I'm going to show you another really good tip for drums with synthwave, is muck around with the pitch of the drums themselves, because on the actual drum machines, one of the big things of the time was you could change the pitch of the individual drums, which was like revolutionary. And so people got some really low pitch snares, kicks and stuff, and that kind of became part of the sound. So let's move this down. That sounds like really industrial. That's like down by 2 tones, down by like more. That's pretty comical. That's quite a good sound. And that's just taking a pitch shifter and shoving it on the snare drum. This is why I kind of like working in this way, because I'm not a massive fan of these drum machines here. They're kind of cool and I tend to bounce them out. But this is like, that you can do the same thing on these. I just find that looking at it at a door is good for my simple mind. So that really helps. So like I was saying, that's like really the main points you need. You've got to get the right samples. That's the kind of main thing. And then look at pitch shifting, because again, that's another big part of getting that overall vibe on the go. The other thing as well, which I pre-prepared, was to get yourself like a couple of reverbs to get you in the park of some of the cool effects. So one effect we can add that we'll quickly talk about, which is like classic. I'm clipping that a bit. It's just, let's just take like a basic gated reverb. So Valhalla Room maybe. So you can use any reverb plugin, but what we want is we want to find something that's got some gated reverb. Okay, so we're going to attach the gated reverb to the snare drum. So let's have a look at that. Make you the right color, because that's the most important thing, is the way it looks apparently. Okay, so the snare here with the gated reverb, that's without. You can actually hear the sample's already got some gated reverb, so I'm adding on top to widen that out. Okay, and that little short gated reverb really adds to the vibe. But let's hear the drum kit with it. So now we've got quite a cool industrial feels of the snare drum, just some gated reverb. Just on the preset. I didn't do anything. Short verb. That's why I love that plugin. It's got fantastic presets on it. And the snare drum's just turned down by a couple of tones. So I like to work this fast. I don't like to get into the ultra details yet. So I want the vibe. I want to get on with my composition. So I think that's kind of like the reverb. The other reverbs you can do with the crash, I've gone for like a really long reverb, and for that I've used the Valhalla Vintage Verb here on the 1980s setting. If you've got this plugin, the color, I never knew this, the color actually changes the EQ of the reverb, which I thought just kind of blew my mind, because I literally just thought it was a color thing for a while, but no, it doesn't. So you can get the more recent you go in the time era, I might bring it to the bigger screen so guys can see it. You can actually see here it says now. That's really bright and really modern. 80s is kind of in between. 70s is really dark. So of course, 80s it is. And then what I've done is I've put that on the crash to get like a really wide sounding crash sound. One of the problems that you get with the drum machine samples is because they're dry, which is what you want. They don't really have a lot of vibe. And if we're going for this kind of epic Knight Rider computer game thing, a reverb like that's pretty cool. And we can muck around that more. We can make that more spacious. We could put more high back into the actual reverb itself. Ooh, maybe bring that down in terms of decay time. So now we've got like an unrealistic massive reverb thing with that gated verb. Go bang. So I find for me, those basic principles really help me get the vibe going with the drum kit for this genre really, really fast. And it doesn't really matter if this is like a new thing to you. You've just got to follow these principles. You've got to get the right samples. And when I mean right samples, just something within that era. But you will know. If you're wondering, how do I get that kind of gritty, thwacky drum thing? Well, it's probably because it's a Linn drum or an emulation drum or something from J800 or some sort of vintage sample. It's funny actually because Jack Antonoff is a massive Linn drum user and he's used it in a lot of pop productions. So that's an interesting thing to take in perspective because the Linn drums kind of like come back in fashion, and now I guess it's come like full wave with synthwave and synth pop. I've got some pre-prepared music for when I did a different take of this lesson. I mean, you can hear this. Let's just quickly hear the drums with just this real basic stuff on the go here. Let's have a listen. You can hear with the keyboards as well. They're very specific to that 80s sound. The drums really start becoming incredibly important. So I think the summary from today's quick little lesson is get your samples right. Get those vintage drums on the go. And you can either get them through downloading samples. You can buy sample packs. That's obviously a really popular thing at the moment. I am a big Splice user because it's just for the cost and the convenience of having it all in one go is great. ADSR have a free librarian if you're not going to go down that, and you can use your own samples and just preload them into that, and you just go on their website and download that for free. So that's easy. And then you've got the other way, which is using the drum machine. It's my least favorite way, but it's a more authentic approach, which could be good if you want something, but it's a bit more synth poppy. It's a bit more trying to be like a record from the 1980s, rather than the kind of EDM approach of synthwave. So just a few basic approaches, a few basic things to get you in that area for the sound, and just remember those reverbs. That's really important as well. As you've got a couple of gates, a couple of big silly reverbs to get you that kind of modern feel, combining with the vintage stuff, and you're kind of good to go. So just a short couple of thoughts on that subject, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.